Hey friends, this is Dan and Stephanie Burke. You're watching Behind the Scenes Divine Intimacy Radio. Today we're going to be meeting with our good friend, or introducing you to our good friend Kris McGregor. And I'm not going to tell you the name of her ministry yet, apostolate, but she has something. We have a similar species of interest and desire in terms of serving the church. So she has the best Catholic resources in audio form in the entirety of the church that I'm aware of. So if you want to learn about that, hang out for a minute. But I want to tell you first about the summit, 2023 Avila Summit coming up, the Marian Mystery and the Triumph of the Immaculate Heart, October 8th or 13th to the 15th. Bishop Liam Carey, Claire Dwyer, Father John Burns, Ignatius Schweitzer, Regina Marie Gorman, Dr. Mark Miravalli. Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament in Hansville, Alabama. If you haven't been there, it's worth going there, even if all these great speakers weren't there. And if you want to learn more, or you want to sign up, go to SpiritualDirection.com/events. We usually end up with several hundred people on the waiting list for our summit. So
yeah, don't delay.
If you don't want to miss it, go there. And if you're watching on the screen, you can see it there, SpiritualDirection.com/events. It shows all of our events there as well. So with that, why don't we jump into the show? On your mark, get set, go. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke. Welcome to Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest,
your hermitage of the heart,
your monastery of the mind, where we lift our hearts and minds to heaven to draw on the wisdom of the saints to help us navigate the tumult of this life. And today we have another human. And
another human. When is this going to stop?
Right. Another human who has another apostolate where there isn't another apostolate I feel more that is more closely aligned to our work. SpiritualDirection.com, kind of Divine Intimacy Radio. There's no other apostolate that's more perfectly aligned in desire, in focus, than Kris McGregor's work at Discerning Hearts. So why don't you introduce her a little more detail?
Absolutely. Kris McGregor, our friend, is the founder and executive director of Discerning Hearts, a pioneer in creating podcasts, radio broadcasts, and publications faithful to the teachings of the Roman Catholic Church and its rich, authentic spiritual tradition. She is a featured commentator on the lives of St. Catherine of Siena, St. Francis de Sales, and St. Teresa of Avila for the Eternal Word television network series, The Doctors of the Church. Kris hosts several radio series featured on the Spiritual Catholic and Iowa Catholic radio networks. She is also a frequent guest on Catholic radio and has given numerous seminars on prayer and lives of the saints. She and her husband, Bruce, have been married for over 36 years. Wow. Have 3 children and are oblates of Saint Benedict. Welcome, Kris.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Dan. What a blessing to not only be with you, but to be with friends and, and have a spiritual friendship like ours. And I am so grateful to be here, as I said, but also to walk that journey. I think we're, as you said, on the same road.
Yeah.
Not even on different sides, but we walk on the same road together. And it's such a joy to be with you today.
Now, I want to know, for me, the beginning of SpiritualDirection.com, which is really kind of the comparative apostolic work to Discerning Hearts, it began around 2009 because my motivation was I was trying to dive into authentic Catholic spirituality. And I found a bunch of junk. We have a post coming up on just one of the worst books in modern times called The Universal Christ by Father Richard Rohr, is coming up here soon. And I just am shocked that the CDF hasn't already done something, but that's another topic. but I was troubled with that kind of reality being the norm out on the internet, right? I didn't found you at the time. I don't know when you were founded. So my motivation was to repropose Catholic mystical tradition back to the church. I should say authentic, which is a big deal for you too. Kind of what was the impetus for Discerning Hearts to begin?
Well, my friend, it was right around the same time you started. There must have been a movement of the Holy Spirit happening, as it does during times of confusion, right? And we started officially, I would say, in June of 2010, but the movement really started about March 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And as you might remember, in that year, within that course of that year, there was some major implosions happening, especially with public and private associations of the faithful that were led by spiritual leaders who many people came to see as their teachings were important and were influencing the church, and then they collapsed. You would see whether it was someone in our own region in Omaha, Nebraska, there was the Intercessors of the Lamb, who are very involved in spiritual warfare ministry, and many others would have large conferences, and that just and I trying to say this for those who this was important for them at that time, because it's a very tender place when you talk about these issues.
Sure.
But it just, out of a disobedience to what the ultimate superior of those associations is, the bishop, out of a disobedience to that, it collapsed. And I watched people next door collapsing spiritually, emotionally, but also we saw nationally, didn't we? Even someone as dynamic and influential and touched lives of many, like Father John Karapi.
Yeah, that was pretty tragic. And so
and
your motivation was to bring some help and healing to the church, or what was going on?
That, like you, I was on a quest. Well, what is real? What is authentic? What can we follow in this spiritual journey and feel confident in? And of course, it led to the lives of the saints, the doctors of the church, and those persons who have a particular ear to the heart of Christ, speaking those truths to the world. So people like, we all know Father Timothy Gallagher, who has been involved in your ministry as well. And of course, Dr. Anthony Lillis.
Yeah.
And who do they all lead us to? They don't necessarily lead us to themselves.
Right.
They lead them to the truth that is being spoken through those saints and those mystical folks who the church has identified as authentic.
Just to give folks a real grounding in what we're talking about here is DiscerningHearts.com, and I'll give an attempt to describe it, Kris, and then you can, help with that. But essentially, the SpiritualDirection.com began in written form, and Discerning Hearts began in audio form. Is that right?
That's right. Way back when there weren't very many boats in that sea. Yeah. I mean, way back a long time ago.
So you have thousands of hours at DiscerningHearts.com of faithful, magisterium faithful teaching on the all focused on the interior life. So Timothy Gallagher it's probably the most time I've spent on your site is listening to Father Gallagher. And of course we do a little bit of audio, but ours is much more weighted heavily on the written word. And so list some of the names so Timothy Gallagher, Dr. Anthony Lillis, who else would folks know that are out there on Discerning Hearts in interview format?
Most recently, Father Donald Haggerty.
Oh, yeah.
Who has been very prominent. Dan Burke. Speaking.
Lowered your standards.
Not at all.
What were you thinking?
You know what I was? I was waiting. I was just waiting for him to have a moment of time. And, but so many others. I mean, I tried to go to those who could authentically speak out of their charism. I can't, maybe we'll talk about the word authentic again, because I say it so often. But for example, Father Thomas McDermott, who I remember seeing long ago on one of the live programs on EWTN being interviewed by Father Mitch Pacwa. And his writings on St. Catherine of Siena are probably the best. And even Father Pacwa acknowledged that at the time on the life of St. Catherine. Well, to have him to be able to speak to her Dominican charism and how that, it's not just somebody talking about her moments of mystical insights, but he was able to show how Catherine spoke about it as a Dominican. And I think that's important. And then Father Mauritius Fildi, who has talked about Benedictine spirituality, who is very a good son of the church, I would say a spiritual son of Benedict XVI, and was able to talk about the charism again in a way that he understands it. So it's not just somebody who hasn't lived it out or has read things and now is repeating, but it's somebody who is really knows the heart of what that communication is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a lot of ground to cover, all these different charisms, all these different spiritualities. So, and I don't know if this is a good bridge for this or not, but what are some of the traps that can be encountered when speaking about the spiritual life, especially on platforms such as podcasts, social media? Is it, because that requires kind of a breadth of knowledge for you as well. And also navigating the waters of this new media that we're dealing with, what are your thoughts on that?
Boy, I think both of you could speak to this as well. You have to be very careful not to fall in love with the sound of your own voice. And because so many people will come to you and say, oh, this is really special. You've really touched my heart. And you have to be so anchored to know that it's not, I am so nothing, but you identify that as Christ that is doing the work. And the trap can become, especially in this new media, the rise of the spiritual personality. And unfortunately, and I know I've danced with this one, and thank God for confession, but spiritual pride can become something that is so subtle that before you know it, you have become so self-inflated that you begin to believe I need to be out there. It needs to be me. I have something important to say. And it can cause those who are following you to not focus on Christ, but to focus or on the message of that particular saint, which is the light from heaven speaking to us. But it becomes about the personality, and it can become a cult of personality, i.e. in modern vernacular, maybe branding. This is my brand. This is what I do. And that's not healthy for that soul. And we've seen that, haven't we, over the last 5 years, especially in social media. It can become very ugly, and what's counter to virtue.
It looks weird. It gets weird really fast.
Really fast.
Yeah. I'd kind of love to continue this conversation when we get back, because it's a problem out in the secular world. And I think that often, in the Catholic sphere, we can think we're immune from it because we're talking about spiritual things. Oh, we're talking about God, therefore that kind of thing is not going to bite us. So when we get back, we'll continue our conversation with Kris McGregor.
We'll be right back. So during the break, folks, I just want to tell you really quickly about a course that's available at the Avila Institute. It is the Marian Mystery and the Triumph of the Immaculate Heart. And no, that's not the course. That's the summit. I already told you about that. So if you want to go to the summit, October 13th through the 15th, go to the SpiritualDirection.com/events. The course I wanted to tell you about is Living at the Hand of the Lord, the Life and Thought of St. Edith Stein, an in-depth look at one of the most compelling saints of the 20th century. But Dr. Elizabeth Mitchell is just an amazing communicator, holy woman, obviously, by the way that she teaches and speaks. So that'll be available here fairly shortly. You got to apply soon, and the course will be on Friday nights. Avila-institute.org. Avila-institute.org. Before we go back to the show, have you ever had Dr. Mitchell on your podcast?
I haven't. I mean, you guys blow me away. I just think you have brought together so many wonderful people.
Oh, you'd love her. I really recommend you check her out. She's really, really a gift when she talks about, especially Edith Stein. So
I've been looking for someone to talk about her. So that would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's head back into the show.
Okay.
On your mark, get set, go. This is Dan and Stephanie Burke. Welcome back to Divine Intimacy Radio. We're talking with Kris McGregor from DiscerningHearts.com. And before the break, we were talking about the danger of personality. And, you know, one thing that when our site started to take off, I wrote a best-selling Catholic book in 2011. I think that was part of the reason it really went big. But I was advised that I needed a Dan Burke page, and I needed a Wikimedia page, and I needed to promote me. And so after I threw up, I said, no, thank you.
That's why I like you so much. I like it when you get that internal throw up reflex.
Well, and I've even, God be praised, totally exited social media. I still have a Facebook page, but I don't even know the password. The team does, and so they post stuff, but I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, that's another conversation.
I haven't looked at it in a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I maybe this is a good segue into this next topic, but you know, that battle about the cult of personalities and such, which it's secular media, we're not immune to it, and in Catholic media, one of the things that I've been so grateful is this sense of being hidden in some ways, because we're not, you know, we have a substantial apostolate, but we're not like all out there, and I'm grateful for that. I feel kind of a little bit more of a smallness and a hiddenness to us, and I think it helps us keep to that authenticity.
I think we're very human.
We are, we're not all polished and all that. So I don't think we fixed the venue for being a cult of personality. But anyway, being that as it may, what we're talking about really at the core of all that is spiritual warfare, right? It is spiritual warfare. It's this temptation to get off, go on the wrong way, go a way that is not the way. So why in your programs you have a lot of discussion about the reality of spiritual battle, and in particular the spiritual warfare area. So why is that topic an important subject for people to grasp as they attempt to grow in their faith life?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we are journeying on the same side, because we both, don't we, have that reality that there is the two standards. There's Christ and everything that he's taught, and also the work of the enemy. And for many, the denial of the devil, the denial of evil, or on the flip side, the exaggeration of the devil and evil because to his delight, because it gives him more power.
Yeah.
You know, so you really have to, I mean, there is, we say every Sunday, we believe in the visible and invisible. And in that invisible realm, there is this reflection of a battle that is going on, but it has already been won, right? I mean, God has, and is particularly through the redemptive action of our Savior, has triumphed. And so all we have to do is call on that. But people don't realize that, because they don't even realize that they're being influenced or tempted into sin. It's still their choice, right? But they don't understand all the dynamics of what a good but possibly broken and wounded heart may act out of. And so, and Stephanie, you know that, because I mean, you have such a maternal nature. I mean, when you talked about being hidden, that's very Marian. That's the Marian disposition, you know. And I think that for many people, the reality of that needs to be talked about, because they're not necessarily always hearing that from those they feel are spiritual leaders.
Yeah. Not only the reality of the beauty and the power of it.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful and powerful place to be, is hidden with Christ in God. It's just kind of glorious. And it really speaks to this, to the theme of everything that you do, your apostolate of this discerning heart. Because if we're not hidden, we can't really be discerning. If we're all out there, outward facing, but not internal, if we don't start from an interiority of peace and discernment with the Lord before we go out there, then we'll get off on the wrong track. It's interesting. I think Father Ripperger has said, the devil's not under every rock; he's under every other rock, and I think that's a good kind of balance, where it's not too much and not too little, because sometimes people do get a little wigged out and they're going, y'all talk about spiritual warfare too much. But I think one of the important things is, if you think about battleground, if you think about warfare just in the worldly sense, right? Battle plans have to be made. If you don't know where the enemy is, you can't properly fight and protect what's been given and entrusted to you. Whatever you're supposed to be protecting or gaining back or whatever. And we are the church militant. And we must know where the enemy is in order to root him out and to take back ground, souls that have lost their way and are being wrecked in the process. So I think behind all that we do is this hunger for souls, this desire to help people find the way and to draw back and fight back the darkness and give them the proper tools to do so that they can rightly step into their dignity as children of God and do so confidently and triumphantly.
And that's a very, what you just described, that's a very mom thing, as for women in particular. And so that Mary, and again, the work of Our Lady, and I'm sure that conference that you guys are going to bring out, it will point those elements out. But it's natural. As a mom, you have to teach the good and also the danger, because you want to protect that child. That child is so precious. But, one of the things that I enjoyed so much last summer, and it was such a blast doing the program with Dan on the work of the interior castle, because he saw it from the guy perspective, in that, Mama Teresa talked about all the great things, but the emphasis wasn't always about, she kind of talked about the enemy, but he said Dan would pause and say, now, wait, okay, what is she saying? And as a guy, what do I need to do to instruct all of you, both men and women, on how to make this practical and protective? And that's what, I think is so important about both sides of that. Don't you think?
I do. And just so you know what Kris is talking about, we did a series on Devil in the Castle, and you can find it over at DiscerningHearts.com. I just want to say again, Kris is doing an extraordinary work. I want every one of our regular listeners who are not familiar with Discerning Hearts to really go over there and check it out. It's really important that we help our listeners find the best resources, which is often why we point to EWTN, of course, or to Sophia Institute Press. There's other good publishers as well. But there's really hand in hand, I think we have two of the best resources out in the digital world. But Discerning Hearts is by far the best. There's nothing like it in purely audio form, with just, I don't know, do you know how many hours of interviews do you have? Tens of thousands? It's got to be.
Yeah, I'm old. Yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah,
there's more gray hair over here.
Okay. Well, and I have to say to everybody out there, this is one of those examples where when God sends people out 2 by 2, they're and companions, whether you realize it or not. I mean, I'm thinking of Hildegard and even Bernard and so many others that are out there in shared ministry. As I welcome the opportunity to learn and grow from Dan and Stephanie. And, there have been times because of the continuing movement on the top of the sea that at Discerning Hearts, there may come a moment where, okay, something wasn't hearing that the same way. I didn't understand that, and Big Brother Dan would, hey, Kris, do you realize that this person, because you don't want to take people down the wrong path. The spiritual life is so different than talking, and I say this again out of all respect and reverence for the work of our other brothers and sisters in ministry, that scriptural studies, apologetic studies, all important. But when it comes to the spiritual life, you got to be very careful. This is tender territory. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to take people down the dark path.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one of the challenges with the interior life is that it's spiritual theology is theology by way of analogy, right? Mm-hmm. It's not is the line. You have to have good moral and dogmatics to be able to travel well in spiritual theology. So we need, the minds of Aquinas and others who think so clearly and categorically, and help us to delineate the truth. So of course, those are our boundaries. But if you don't have those, you end up. I was just reviewing this amazing treatment of Richard Rohr's book, The Universal Christ. And he is all in the spiritual realm and has had to have had the worst formation ever, or he threw it away in moral and dogmatics, because he can't, or in even good philosophy, because he doesn't even have the ability to travel with coherence, with just the law of non-contradiction. So, you have Jesus as one thing and Jesus as another, but, they're mutually exclusive. So either he's God and you're not, or you're God and maybe he's just another dude and a good one, but that doesn't cut it. So that's what I love about discerning hearts, is that you really have taken care to provide the best voices in the church, and you do it in an engaging, interesting format. And so everybody out there, go to check out Kris's work, discerninghearts.com, and you'll be truly blessed. And make sure you have all of those podcasts and beautiful shows and interviews with all these great teachers in your ears every day, and you'll get holy. And stay off of YouTube. I just got YouTube off my phone, and I need to myself remember that when I'm looking for something interesting, I pop over there. So Kris, thank you for all your great work in service to the church, and thank you for being with us on Divine Intimacy Radio.
Thank you both. This has been one of the best things that's happened, just being in your presence. I want to come down to the retreat house. I want to be able to.
Please do. Please do.
Okay, I do.
Until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body irreproachable at the coming of our Lord, Jesus Christ. Amen.